And, all that good jazz. Just laughing at the Republicans, which is always fun. I like laughing at Democrats too, but when the Republicans screw up, it's infinitely funnier because they think they're a lot better than they are. Democrats are at least aware they're kind of crap. They talk about how they failed all the time. Republicans think they're hot shit constantly. But anyways, moving on to Brazil. Let's see. Brazil is currently, I'll switch screens here. Brazil is currently in the middle of an insurrection. They are having a fun time over there. Not in the middle, actually. It's over now. But on January 8th, they had a January 6th, which is a mildly clever joke on my part. Laugh at me. I'm just kidding. That joke was awful. I should have let it go, but it was the only one I could come up with, so I just rolled with it a bunch of times. Beat a dead horse until it's funny. So the insurrectionists have stormed several branches of government. In fact, all of the branches of government have buildings that they're housed in, like normal. You don't usually convene Congress outside in a field. And they have stormed all three buildings: the Supreme Court, the Congress, and the Presidential Palace, and they have done many property damages. But unfortunately for them, for some reason, they failed to get the memo that all three of the buildings were empty. That's right. The insurrection, which was supposed to try to prevent the new Congress from taking power, and from the new President Lula to prevent new President Lula from taking power, happened on a day where all of the government buildings were empty, which is hilarious. You spend all your time planning an insurrection, planning a storming of the Capitol building, just to show up when it's empty and do nothing. In fact, they did so little that they hung out for a little while. They broke some stuff, smashed some windows, crawled all over the building, and then the police showed up and dispersed the crowd and arrested 200 people. And that was the end of that, which is a much better handling of the situation than what happened in the United States. The United States basically let them break in with people there, threaten many people's lives, reasonably so, and then just let a bunch of them go home to Wisconsin. Sorry, Wisconsin. I'm sure you're a nice state. It was just the first one that came to my mind. Whereas Brazil brought in the police and ejected them from the building and arrested 200 of them. So, let's read what happened. Here's a cool picture of them actually on the Congress building. Honestly, I'm not a fan of insurrections, but you do get some cool pictures out of them. Supporters of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro stormed Congress and other buildings in the capital of Brasilia on Sunday, calling for the military to take over Brazil's government. By evening, security forces had retaken control of the breached buildings, said Flavio Dino, the Minister of Justice and Public Security. Dino said about 200 people had been arrested, while the district's governor said more than 400 had been arrested. Many Bolsonaro supporters have refused to accept the far-right former leader's defeat in elections more than 2 months ago to the leftist Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Yes, I practiced that frickin' name. Who was sworn in as president a week ago. In addition to the Congress building, videos and photos of the scenes posted to social media also showed crowds invading and ransacking the nearby presidential palace and Supreme Court. Swarms of Bolsonaro supporters, known as Bolsonaristas, which is a hilarious name because it sounds like they make shitty coffee, were seen charging past security barriers and clashing with police who appeared to be using pepper spray against them. Man, I appreciate that they used pepper spray on the crowd, but if you're going to have a January 6th and try to copy the United States, at least have the police show up with rubber bullets. I mean, that's how we do it. We take people's eyeballs out. But hey, I guess you can do better than we are. We don't have to be the barometer for which the world measures itself. You can do better than us. Cool. I'm not against it. In addition to the Congress building video videos and photos of the scenes posted to social media also showed crowds invading and ransacking the nearby presidential palace and Supreme Court. I read this paragraph already. Congressional offices were closed as the mob moved up the ramp of the Congress building and climbed on the roof and broke windows. That's what you get when you stop looking at where you're reading. You read the same paragraph over again. Congressional offices were closed as the mob moved up the ramp from Congress buildings and climbed on the roof and broke windows. Some of the crowd, many draped in the Brazilian national flag or its colors, looked to be recording the invasion from their phones. Again, cool photo. I mean, President da Silva, who was in Sao Paulo state, called the storming an act of barbarism by a mob of fascists. Whoever did this will be found and punished, he wrote on Twitter. Democracy guarantees the right to free expression, but it also requires the people to respect institutions. There is no precedent in the history of the country what they did today. For that they must be punished. I think there's a typo in there. He also blamed a lack of security for the events. In a news conference following the attack, da Silva announced his appointment of a new head of security in the federal district who will be reporting directly to him. Dino said the federal government sent reinforcements. In addition to the available forces, he said, were already at work. This absurd attempt to impose their will by force will not prevail, he said in a tweet earlier in the day. Okay, so let's talk about what has happened. In the aftermath of the insurrection, 200 people were arrested. They obviously have not stood trial, and there's no word whether or not they have been released or not. But so their fate is currently up in the air, as would be expected, given how close to the actual event we still are. But as a result, and the attack was based around the same sort of like stolen election conspiracies that happened here in the United States. Bolsonaro is basically Trump 2.0. I mean, he basically modeled his entire political career, intentionally or unintentionally, off of the way that Trump ran his campaign. I'm talking the optics. Obviously, Bolsonaro's a smarter guy than Trump, so he was a more effective politician than Trump was, but the optics of his campaign and his presidency were very, very similar to Trump's. And as such, he pushed the exact same kind of election conspiracies that caused the January 6th insurrection here in the United States. So, history repeating itself very shortly after the last time it happened. But the difference between January 6th in the United States and January 6th in Brazil is Lula has managed to wrestle a pretty good response from the government over it. He has the Supreme Court of Brazil has declared the governor of the region that the insurrection took place in. For 90 days, he is ousted as the governor and is replaced by Lula, who, being the president, has access to some federal powers that the governor doesn't have. So basically, Lula for 90 days is like uber governor of this region and can essentially do whatever he wants in that region without pushback from the local government. Up to the limits that are allowed by the federal constitution in Brazil. And as such, he has vowed that he will start investigations into finding out who financed this particular insurrection and making sure that they are brought to justice, which is an interesting way to go about it because the United States went the other route, which was go after the people at the insurrection and completely leave the people who enabled it to go free. Whether or not you believe Trump personally enabled the January 6th insurrection, there were certainly people in Congress and certainly people in the media or the Republican machine that isn't the actual private Republican Party machine, and then online spaces that were pushing this and planning it and trying to make it a thing. And Lula is basically going after them. The people who set this up. the people with the power to incite this kind of response from the people and organize it. That's who he's going after. And that's a good thing. That's the way that we should have done it. The people are only as informed as the information they are given. People have a mob mentality. They can be convinced to do things that would normally go against their nature, given the right kind of branding or messaging or groupthink or whatever it is that's required. So I don't think that it's necessarily justified to go after the people at the January 6th insurrection as a group. There are some individuals that obviously did some shit that is like definitely um uh um what's the word I'm thinking of? Shoot. Definitely criminal. Not the word I'm hunting for, but it's close enough. That's definitely criminal that you could prosecute them for, but the vast majority of people at the January 6th insurrection were probably just they're probably misguided, misinformed, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And I don't necessarily think that makes them guilty of anything other than being a cog in the machine that this thing was. We usually don't blame cogs in the machine unless it's a truly awful thing that happened. Um, however, we did not go after any, and I mean any, of the heads that sort of made this thing happen. And Lula has decided that the opposite is the good way to go. Go after the heads. Go after the head. And don't worry about the people that were on the ground to a reasonable extent. I think that's the right way to go. I think it's a good move. Lula so far seems to be doing a pretty good job at sort of like getting Brazil back on the track to not destroying the Amazon, to trying to squash the fascist uprising that's happening there. He's not relying on like free speech and public opinion exclusively to sort of get the country back on the track to reasonable democratic standards. He's doing what a leader should, and when you're elected in a way that proves there's a huge swath of the country that's not okay with the direction that it's going, enough to get you elected, you act upon that energy. That's my main beef with Biden and my main beef with Obama is they get elected on this wave of energy that's like, we don't like the direction the country is going in. Things are getting worse at the moment. Please come in and change stuff. And both of them came in and kind of half-assed it. Obama half-assed it more than Biden did in his first 4 years. To be fair, Biden's done a better job than I thought he would, but Biden is still half-assing it. And Lula seems to not be half-assing it. He's started these investigations immediately. He's cracked down on the local governor who let this happen, who is a Bolsonaro ally. He's cracked down on him. He has immediately revoked selling off public companies that handle energy and commodities in Brazil to private companies. It's like, nope, those are for the people. The government will continue to operate those, and canceled those immediately, which helps with environmental problems in the rainforest. He's also immediately started to enact legislation to set the deforestation limit of the Amazon to 0, which is very good. And he seems to be doing okay. So, since this is all done in favor in service of Bolsonaro, where is Bolsonaro right now? Funny enough, he's in Florida. Bolsonaro is hanging out in Orlando. Motherfucker's enjoying himself some Disney while his country is on fire, literally, in some cases, in his name. He's hanging out in Orlando. So, what should the U.S. be doing about this? This is a good question. The United States doesn't actually have much of a dog in this fight politically. Bolsonaro was friendly for the most part to United States business, and And Lula will probably be fairly friendly to United States business as well. The United States doesn't have much of an interest financially in deforestation of the Amazon. In fact, it's widely considered in the U.S. to be a bad thing. So Lula is not anti-U.S. in his attempt to stop deforesting the Amazon. So we don't really have much of a reason to get involved in this. And yet Bolsonaro is hanging out in Florida. Wonder why he picked Florida. Could the fact that Mar-a-Lago and DeSantis are both there? Possibly. Now, there's been some calls to expel Bolsonaro from the United States back to Brazil. I don't think that the United States should expel Bolsonaro under the pretense of we want him arrested for enacting for encouraging an insurrection on his country. We can't get a handle of that in our own damn country, and also it's none of our business, frankly. But because it's none of our business, I think that should be our justification for sending him back, being like, look, you're a bit like, we don't want to get involved in this, and you being here involves us. So would you please, since you're not a U.S. citizen, and we can revoke your passport, or we can revoke your right to be here at any time, kindly get the fuck out. Go back to Brazil and deal with the mess that you have created. Or go somewhere else that will take you. But don't stay here. We don't want to be involved. That's personally what I would like to see. I would like to see them kick him right out of Gatorland and send him back to Brazil to deal with his problems. Where he goes from there, I don't actually care. Just don't be here.